We're recording, just so you know, and if you have a problem with that, maybe you can. I was gonna say something funny, but I'll just say you can maybe turn off your camera and use the chat. We are glad everyone's here and we hope you want to stay. So welcome to the April meeting of the Brooklyn Solid Waste Advisory Board. We are about to get started with our amazing speakers in just a minute. Vondra, do you want? Oh yeah, maybe we'll go around and introduce ourselves. You can put your names in the chat and what brings you here if you are just joining us. I'm Rhonda, I'm chair of the Brooklyn SWAB.
Mary Ellen Sullivan, I'm a member of the Brooklyn SWAB.
Sherry Rickle, I'm a member of the Brooklyn SWAB and Outreach Committee Chair.
Robert Safford, member of the SWAB, and Imani Gordon.
Sergeant Salusia, prospective members visiting. Yeah.
I'm Lacey Tauber. I'm the legislative director for Borough President Reynoso.
And I'm Beth Slepian. I'm vice chair of the Brooklyn SWAB.
Excellent. Vondra, did you raise your hand on purpose?
I did, actually. I wanted to see if I could make an announcement because I will have to leave a little early. So I just wanted to make an announcement. I don't know when I can do that.
Go ahead.
About this weekend is there are lots of Earth Day celebrations going on. And there's a big festival Sunday at Union Square at from noon to 6. And so the micro haulers and processors and composters are sharing a booth. So I wanted to invite you all to come. I'm going to just put a copy of the flyer in the email because I can't seem to get a copy to put into the chat for whatever reason. So I'm going to just add it to the BK SWAB's email address.
Okay.
And then on the 21st, on April the 21st, at Brooklyn Ethical at 11 o'clock in the morning, our platform is going to be on facing New York City's composting crisis.
Excellent.
So that's going to be at the New York Society, no, the Brooklyn Society on 4th Avenue at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. So if you can share this with us, we can share them in the email list too. I'm sure people would like to see it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so
we do have a quorum.
Okay, we do have a quorum. And Debbie sent around the minutes for the meeting. While we have a quorum, does anybody want to propose that we approve the meeting? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from last month, from Mark's meeting? Oh, wait,
Mark, we can't hear you, but we see that you're talking. Mark makes a motion.
Okay, Mark makes a motion. Do we have a second? Dylan seconds it. All in favor?
Special glasses for this.
Yeah. Don't stare directly into the screen.
See everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, yes, we've passed.
Anyone opposed? Do we have any abstentions? Okay, they are approved. So why don't we get started with our speaker? So we have Guel, who is Director of Community Engagement and Environmental Justice for the Center of Health and Environment across the lifespan in the Department of Medicine and Climate Science at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. I don't know if you can memorize that and say it on your own without looking at it, but that's an impressive title. And Luz brings with them Riana Mehreen, a Southeast Queens resident, and they are going to speak about a recent environmental justice project they work on together. and go over some anti-racism strategies that they use in their EJ Research Partnership and how those strategies impact policy. I'm very excited to welcome them. We've been working to get them for a number of months now, and we're so happy that they're here. So welcome, and please take it away.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. And thank you, Rihanna, for also joining us today to be able to co-present on this presentation. And so we're really excited to be able to share what our ongoing work around Southeast Queens and the waste facilities that we're doing over there. And so I just wanted to quickly start with introducing myself. My name is Guel, as Rhonda mentioned, and my pronouns are they, them. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Environmental Justice for our HEAL Center. And so a lot of the work that I end up doing is really focused on ensuring that direct community concerns guide all of our center research priorities. So we're not doing research for the sake of research, but again, this is all directly informed by community concerns. And so for today's presentation, we plan on doing a quick check-in activity, followed by introductions from me and Rihanna, and then we will talk about how we can apply anti-racism strategies to your work and beyond. And then lastly, we will share our process in organizing a community-based participatory research process, also known as CBPR, with Southeast Queens residents to address environmental injustices related to waste facilities. And then lastly, we'll just do a quick closing with a little bit of reflections with the group to be able to leave off and be able to think about how can they apply some of this work into your ongoing organizing spaces. And so we want to take this quick opportunity, since we're new to this space, Rihanna and I are not familiar with how you all end up organizing. We wanted to take this opportunity to check in and ask this group and share which dog best represents the energy that you're bringing to the space. So all the dogs are numbered differently. And for those that are in person, maybe somebody can jot it down in the chat for us. And then Rihanna is going to summarize the chat for us so that we can get an idea of what is the type of energy that we were bringing to this space before we begin the presentation. So yeah, let us know. I can let you know that for me personally, I am between a 1 and a 2. Today's been a really, really long day, but I'm also feeling like a number 4, where I'm ready to be in this space and to be able to share with you all and be engaged. So it can be a combination of different dogs. So just know that it doesn't have to be just one. So we're excited to hear your responses.
I'm seeing a couple of 4s, 5s, a lot of 5s actually.
Wow.
I see a 7. Wow.
I'm shocked. Most of the time, whenever we enter most of the spaces, it's always 1s and 2s. So to be in a space where people are like 7, 8s, now I'm getting more energized. So thank y'all. Anything else, Rihanna, that you noticed in the chat?
A few 2s and 3s.
Okay. So some people are also waking up like us. It's the beginning of the week. We got to stretch a little bit. So yeah, we just, again, wanted to do this really quick check-in activity to just get an understanding of what energy you're all bringing into the space. And so that we can also accordingly adjust our presentation to your energy level and what your capacity is to be able to show up to the space. So thank you all so much for sharing your responses. The next slide. And so we're really excited to share more about ourselves personally. So about myself and Rihanna, we feel as though talking about our personal lives really ends up shaping so much of our personal work that we do here at Mount Sinai and even beyond in Jamaica, Queens. So I'll start by sharing more about my personal story and then how it led me to this field of environmental justice. And then I'll pass it over to Rihanna, she's going to be able to share more about her personal story and how that relates to our ongoing work right now. So for me personally, when I talk about my story, for me, it's pictured on the left side. You'll see the fields. You'll see on the left bottom side is a picture of my mom. My mom's an agricultural worker. And then we have 2 dogs in our household. One of them is named Serena. The other one is named Keanu Reeves. So we have a celebrity in our household. We wanted to just quickly share what it means to be able to, for me to share a piece of what my personal story is and how it relates to our current work. So I grew up in a predominantly low-income migrant farm worker community where not only my family, but also my neighbors were all farm workers. And so we got to see firsthand how environmental racism impacted us in our everyday lives and beyond. And so for me, seeing almost all my family members be farm workers and face this type of discrimination, I wanted to make sure that whatever field that I was going to shape their everyday lives in a way that it was healthy and sustainable. And unfortunately, most of our homes where we're at in Arizona are right next to agricultural fields. And also my family members work in these agricultural fields for 10 hours and more. So not only are they getting exposed to pesticides at home, but also in the actual occupation. And so we end up seeing a lot of health inequities such as asthma rates that are higher than anywhere else in Arizona. And we also end up seeing other cardiovascular issues associated with pesticide exposure. So again, for me, I really realized the importance of protecting the environmental health of frontline communities from the beginning in a very young age. And it was really has to do with my own personal story and my own family, and wanted to make sure to build a future where their future is also healthy. And now I'll turn it over to Riana, who's going to share a little bit more about her personal story.
Hi, my name is Riana. My parents immigrated here a few years before I was born. They sacrificed a lot to make a living for my sister and me. We used to live in small apartments in Flushing, and over time, they saved money, and we finally bought our first house in New York, in Jamaica, Queens, in 2021. They were so happy about having a backyard, and the picture in the bottom corner is a cherry blossom tree in our backyard. It was honestly a dream come true for my parents. Some time passed, and I learned about the environmental justice work that Luz was involved in Southeast Queens as I was completing my MPH at Mount Sinai, and I immediately got involved. After a few months, we suddenly got a letter in the mail notifying us that the MTA will be taking a 5-foot temporary easement of our backyard and 27 other households because of major reconstruction. I had to quickly learn how to advocate with my community for our health and well-being. I was always passionate about working in the field of public health to reduce racial health disparities, and here I was living in a previously red line neighborhood experiencing direct environmental health concerns. This experience has motivated me to continue on this path and address environmental justice issues to increase health equity in my community.
And so as you can all notice from both myself and Riana, within our personal lives and our work, we really have seen how white supremacy has affected not only, again, our personal lives, but all the different structures that we're a part of. And so when we start thinking about what are the effects of white supremacy, we know that white supremacy colonizes our minds, our bodies, our psyches, our spirits, our emotions, as well as the land, the water, and the sky and the air we breathe. And white supremacy tells us who has value, who doesn't, what has value, and what doesn't, in ways that reinforce racial hierarchies of power and control and destroys everything it touches. So for us to be able to start thinking about how do we end up addressing white supremacy in everything that we do, we end up using this facilitation tool known as the oppression tree to visualize how systems of domination such as colonialism, imperialism, white supremacy, and capitalism inform our current social justice struggles. And sometimes in a lot of our efforts, we end up focusing more on these visible outcomes of oppression. And here in this diagram, it's represented by the leaves in the tree. And we end up missing that it's the roots that end up feeding the trunk and then the leaves. So for example, when we start thinking about colonialism, we know that it's a practice of domination, a 400-year period of European conquest, of settlement and exploitation of vast tracts of land and people. And this particular violence against Black and Indigenous folks is a strategic aspect of colonialism that is meant to destroy cultures and then be able to gain access to their lands and resources. And colonialism has allowed for people and the earth to be seen as a commodity for profits rather than acknowledging the sacredness of how earth and the people are interconnected. So if we want to address the rotten roots of environmental inequities and injustices, we must interrogate these systems of domination by practicing root work and envisioning a society where all life is valued and is valued because it's interconnected. And when we critically examine the role of academic institutions, which is where I'm from, in the ways that we uphold white supremacist and colonial views, we see that the academy has intentionally distorted the meaning of science to center whiteness. So for example, in academia, we see a lot of times that the perspectives of Black, Indigenous people of color are dismissed and are devalued in favor of white scientists. And we've seen many examples throughout history where BIPOC scientists are erased from our contributions of science. Yet we know that BIPOC communities, again, since the beginning of time, have been practicing science to be able to survive and be able to preserve culture. And so for us as researchers that work in these academic spaces, I truly believe that we have to continue to foster spaces where science is not just used to characterize an environmental exposure, but rather is actually addressing the root causes of these environmental health inequities. So where we can foster a science culture that acknowledges that all life, again, is interconnected on Earth, and that also science can be used as a political tool to be able to be in service of social justice movements and liberation movements. And so for me, I truly believe that we can organize different science movements that are anti-racist, anti-colonial, anti-capitalist, community-based, and can be practiced to be able to heal from intersecting forms of systems of oppression. And one of the tools of science that we're going to be talking about today as part of our presentations is community-based participatory research, also known as CBPR. CBPR is a partnership approach to equitably involve community members, organizational representatives, academic researchers in all aspects of the research process. And so some of the guiding frameworks that we end up utilizing to inform and ground our CBPR work include anti-racism, environmental justice, and empowerment. So I'll go through each of these and how we end up applying them to our work. So anti-racism is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism in all of its forms. That includes at the individual, interpersonal, institutional, and structural levels by changing systems, structures, policies, and attitudes so that the power is redistributed and shared equitably. So we make sure that everything that we are doing, our work is grounded in this particular framework. And also environmental justice, where we know that BIPOC communities are the most impacted by these environmental burdens, and they deserve a right to be able to be liberated from these exposures. So we truly believe that environmental communities facing these injustices should be the ones leading the path to liberation. And then lastly, we have the word called empowerment. Some of you might have seen empowerment with an EM, but we use empowerment because one of our colleagues from the University of Maryland, he had an ongoing partnership with community members, and he was using the term empowerment with those folks, and his community partners actually corrected him and told him, actually, you're not empowering us. We already have power within ourselves. You're just providing us with the tools so that we can be able to activate that power. So empowerment is about recognizing that we're not here to save community members, that community members have their own voices and their own expertise, and we're here to just be able to be in solidarity with them and amplify that power that they already have. And so when we start thinking about, again, how do we apply all these different concepts into the work that we do, we know that racism harms us in many different ways. Not only does it harm and destroy our communities, it also ends up disrupting our institutions, lives, health, well-being, and relationships, our integrity, and also spirituality. So the journey from racism to anti-racism is not linear, as this diagram, as you can see here, it doesn't even depict. It's not going to be very easy to go from racism to anti-racism, and there's a whole process. And as we go through each of these different zones that I'm going to be describing here, from fear, learning, growth, and transformation, we're going to help you all think about reflecting how anti-racism progresses from fear to all the way to transformation. And so for in the fear zone, which I feel as though most of the time, whenever we're talking about anti-racism, most folks end up staying in this zone, which is where they end up feeling like if they end up making a mistake, that they are a mistake. And so their fear of being wrong deters them from actually being able to learn and grow and be able to retain new information. And so a lot of folks that I have seen who are well-intentioned end up making a mistake, and then they end up staying in the fear zone and don't end up learning how their behavior is problematic and end up taking accountability. But that fear zone is very prevalent in so many of our spaces, including myself. There's certain topics around sorry, there's certain topics that I also don't 100% feel comfortable talking about, that I sometimes feel scared to be able to talk about it. But instead of me being scared about it, I would rather actually learn, grow, than stay in that fear zone, because it's not going to actually support any communities if I just stay there and don't learn and grow. So that's the fear zone. And then when you start thinking about learning, we have to understand that there is learning to be done at the individual level, but also at the interpersonal level. So we have to collectively start thinking about what skills do we need to be able to meet our fear, and name how that fear is letting drive our beliefs, our actions, and decisions. And so in this learning zone, you have to, again, understand how your own privilege, there is privilege in ignoring racism, and you have to recognize that it's a current problem, and you have to currently educate yourself about race and structural issues. And so learning is not going to be you learning, reading one book one time. It's going to be an ongoing process. And then next we have the growth zone, which is where you end up speaking out when you end up seeing racism happening. You start to educate your peers on how racism harms our communities and the work that we do. In the growth zone, you also don't let mistakes deter you from being better and doing better. And the first three zones are really characterized by taking that personal fear all the way to that interpersonal growth. So we're really taking what could happen at that individual level to that interpersonal action. And lastly, in the transformational zone is where we acknowledge that we're no longer together and we can do this together. So we support each other to speak out when we see racism happening. It's more of a we instead of an I. So we continually educate one another on how racism harms our communities. We recognize and learn from our mistakes and use those mistakes to be able to motivate us to do better. We embrace discomfort, and most importantly, we embrace our diverse identities, intentionally engage with one another, and deepen our relationships. And again, because we have been indoctrinated into a racist society, I know that even I myself have so much to learn and unlearn. So my actions are not always in this transformational stage. A lot of my actions can sometimes end up starting at the fear stage and getting all the way to transformation. So just know that it's an ebb and flow when it comes to this diagram, and that I really encourage you all to reflect how you can be able to reflect in your own life. Are there spaces or topics that you feel fearful of, that you're scared of not being able to be correct? And can you challenge that fear so that it's in the betterment of and in service of all social justice and liberation movements?
For this next activity, we want you all to think about groups in which you have been a member that you consider to have been overall positive experiences. Considering these groups, write down 2 to 3 factors that contributed to this being a positive experience. For example, personally, I've attended meetings where the facilitator started with music, and it was honestly an enjoyable experience for me.
Okay, everybody can take some time, and then I'm going to summarize the chat as the responses are coming in to see some of the factors that made it be a positive experience for you all. Yeah, and as Riana had mentioned, she has been part of a meeting where music was the first thing that she listened to as she was coming into the meeting. I know for me, that check-in activity with the dogs, like that was one of my favorite check-in activities that I participated in this training for change around social justice. And so that was one of my favorite activities that I wanted to share with you all. It's like, start thinking about what are good things that made you feel good in some of these meetings, and start thinking about how can you start replicating some of these in the spaces you're a part of. I see some of the responses are groups where I feel listened to, exactly, where you feel so you can be able to speak your mind, and if you are making a mistake, that you feel so you can trust your colleagues to be able to call you in and be able to allow you to again grow and learn and be able to transform. Being welcome as a contributor by default and being asked what I want to contribute, community planning group, exactly. I think a lot of times most folks have already agenda in mind whenever they're coming into meetings, but being able to ask first people directly. What is your lived experience and how can I contribute rather than you telling people what to do is really, really rewarding. All right. Fair treatment from supervisors, honest listening among all members, ability to joke around. Yes, joking around is so important. And again, that's one of the reasons why we started with that check-in, because we wanted to start and be a little bit silly. It's so important to also be able to break some of that tension that sometimes happens in meetings. Affirming and feeling heard and held accountable. Exactly. Whenever you're sharing how you're feeling, does the facilitator actually acknowledge that you're actually not feeling 100% and that your camera needs to be off to be able to attend this meeting? Another person said, where I found an unexpected connection. Yeah, and so a lot of those connections end up happening by sharing some of our own personal lives and our own personal stories into the work that we do. I know with Riana and I, that's one of the ways that we connected is our personal lives and how they connect to environmental justice. And now we have all these other connections that we've been able to have based on that specific first initial connection. Actively welcome and actively appreciated. Yes, we want to celebrate everybody. Everybody has a seat at the table, friendly faces, a welcoming moderator. Yes, so important to always have facilitators. They're also going to bring in the energy and are going to welcome everybody into the space and acknowledge that not everybody in the space can always be in front of a camera. Body mind centering at the beginning of the meeting. Yes, stretching and breathing. Oh, so important. So somatic practices, so those are body embodied practices, are so important to be included in meetings because most of the time we're always sitting in front of our computers. We're like our shoulders hunched up and like our mouth is clenched. And when you finish meetings, you're like, why am I so sore? I'm like, oh, I was so tensed up the whole entire time. So it's important to be able to also have some of those practices to be able to regroup yourself, reconnect to your body, and notice how it's being, currently impacted you. And let's see, great conversation leading to meaningful action. Beautiful, perfect. Well, thank you again all so much for sharing all your responses. We hope that you're also taking note of some of these responses so you can start thinking about how you can incorporate some of these into your own organizing spaces. And if you're interested in learning more about these type of activities, in the QR code, there's going to be QR codes in most of our slides. Those are going to take you directly to all these different tools and resources. So we wanted to give you all that opportunity with all these different materials is to have access to them afterwards. So no worries if you don't have the ability to scan the QR code now, we'll send out the slides afterwards so you have access to these links. And so now we're going to start talking about, again, we started talking about white supremacy and what it means, but one of the things we want to do better when it comes to having conversations around white supremacy is like, how does it actually show up in our everyday spaces? And how can we start naming it, not only in ourselves or at the individual interpersonal level, but also in our institutions. And so white supremacy culture is an ideology that is deeply embedded into the beliefs, values, norms, and standards of our groups, our communities, our towns, our states, our nation, that teaches us both overtly and covertly that whiteness holds value and whiteness is value. And our experience with white supremacy culture is very different based on who we are, our lived experience, our race, our class, our gender, our sexuality, and our religion. And the good news is that while white supremacy culture informs us, it does not define us. It is a construct, and anything that is constructed can be deconstructed and replaced. And so the characteristics of white supremacy diagram showed here in this slide is an invitation to investigate how each and all these different characteristics and qualities lead to disconnection from each other and ourselves and all living beings, and end up impacting how we end up showing up in all these different spaces. And so, for example, one of the characteristics that we're going to share with you all, because we don't have time to be able to go over through each of these different characteristics, we're going to share 3 examples. One of them is individualism. And so for individualism, we end up seeing how we end up putting more value on competition and rather than cooperation. And you often end up seeing also a lot of organizations put more time into devoting skills and how to be able to get to those type of measurements in terms of quantifying things and be measurable rather than devoting the skills on how to be able to collaborate. So I know even in the spaces that I'm a part of, my academic institution doesn't give us a lot of training on how to be able to work with community members. So that's something that we have to take upon ourselves and make sure that we're getting the training so that we can show up as facilitators in a way that is a democratic, equitable process. And so this idea of individualism is really rooted that we have to make it on our own without anybody's help while pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps. And this is a very toxic denial that ends up denying us that life on earth is all interconnected. We need each other to be able to survive and thrive and be able to feel connected to community and culture. So this idea that we have to do it all by ourselves is all rooted again in white supremacy. And it ends up again creating this disconnect. So for us to be able to find antidotes to individualism, we can start thinking about developing a culture where people feel like they can bring problems to the group. So for example, using meetings as a place to solve problems, not just a place to report activities. Another antidote that we wanted to share with you all is the importance of continuing to honor the process as much as the product, meaning honor how you do things as much as what you produce. And I think oftentimes we end up focusing so much more on what we produce rather than the actual process, what got us there. So I really encourage you all, are there ways that you can be able to honor that process and be able to, I know somebody had said that one of the characteristics that they liked is to be able to be celebrated. Are there opportunities to celebrate that process when you're working with communities and in your own organizing spaces?
Another characteristic is valuing quantity over quality. Quantity over quality shows up as resources directed toward producing quantitative, measurable goals such as meeting attendees, number of meetings, democratic decision-making, or the ability to constructively deal with conflict. For example, one way I've seen quantity over quality is in our spaces is folks rushing to complete the agenda without paying attention to people's needs. Sometimes I can visually see a group of people showing up to spaces exhausted and still expected to operate and make decisions at 100%. The antidote for quantity over quality can be as simple as recognizing when you need to go off the planned agenda in order to address people's underlying concerns. Consider adding measures that keep you grounded in what's important. How many times did we laugh together today? How many times did we express gratitude? How many times did we allow silence? Or how many times did we allow dissent? Next slide. Urgency. Now, this characteristic of white supremacy is challenging because we understand that racial justice and equity is urgent. White supremacy and racism threaten, target, and violate BIPOC people and communities every day. White supremacy culture is not urgent about racial justice. White supremacy culture is urgent in the name of short-term power and profit. And white supremacy culture likes to engender a culture of urgency in those of us who are working to dismantle it, because it knows that living with a constant sense that everything is urgent is a recipe for abuse of power and burnout. For example, personally, I feel guilty when I take time to do things for myself. I feel like I should be doing work instead. An antidote for urgency can be having leadership that understands that everything takes longer than anyone expects. Another antidote can be making sure that there is commitment to equity, and that includes discussing and planning for what it means to embed equity practices into the work.
And so we want to share with you a few reflection questions that have helped us personally think about how to incorporate anti-racism strategies into our work plans. And so we want to leave you with these few reflection questions so that you can think about how some of these characteristics show up in your space and to start thinking about antidotes. So one of the questions that we first started with is, again, what are the characteristics of white supremacy that we've observed, not only in ourselves, but in the spaces that we're a part of? And so those were a lot of the conversations that we had between Riana, myself, and the community leaders in Jamaica, Queens, as well as the researchers that we're working with in Mount Sinai. So having those conversations, it all looks very different, again, based on our background. So it's important to identify how it shows up differently in different spaces. We also ended up identifying what antidotes exist for these characteristics of white supremacy and how can we be able to learn about it so that we can implement them in our spaces. And so that gets us to that last point that Rihanna was talking about as well, is that we need to create an action plan. How are you going to embed all these different anti-racism strategies into your work plan? From your meeting spaces to your event spaces, what does that actually look like in practice? And so setting aside time in the agenda to really reflect on these questions and answer them can give you all the opportunity to, again, start thinking about how do you start applying these strategies into your ongoing work. And so many of the anti-racism strategies that we just discussed with you all and mentioned as part of this presentation, we actually have been practicing it and ensuring that we include it as part of our CBPR partnership in Jamaica, Queens. And this pilot project was funded in 2021 by our Center for Health and Environment Across the Lifespan pilot project program through Mount Sinai. And so for the past 4 years, we have been organizing the CBPR partnership with Jamaica Queens residents who are also impacted by waste facilities that are adjacent to, again, a predominantly residential neighborhood that has been previously redlined. So there's all these air quality concerns and all these other environmental justice concerns that are associated with these waste facilities.
So Queens is one of the most ethnically diverse urban areas in the world, as residents often closely identify with their neighborhood rather than with the borough or city. The borough is a patchwork of dozens of unique neighborhoods, each with its own distinct identity. In Southeast Queens, 2 adjacent private waste transfer stations are located next to a predominantly Black, Latinx, and Southeast Asian community and in front of a public park. Trucks from all over New York City truck our trash to 3 neighborhoods in New York City, which are all communities of color. Southeast Queens is one of those communities with a large concentration of waste facilities emitting daily noxious odors. A couple of blocks from the waste transfer station, the Jamaica Bus Depot, is where the New York City MTA stores its bus fleet. They are planning on remodeling this bus depot, but community members such as myself have voiced that we were never part of the decision-making process. We are worried that it will only add to the existing environmental injustices in the area. This region has seen historical disinvestment in the form of racist practices such as redlining and environmental health. As a result of that, we now see that childhood asthma is especially prevalent.
And so when our group was trying to decide of the many different concerns that Jamaica Queens residents had mentioned to us, like which ones we should prioritize, as facilitators, we wanted to make sure that we had tools where community members were able to share from their lived experience rather than coming from this academic side of these are the environmental health impacts of this exposure. We wanted to make sure again that this was directly informed by their lived experience. So when our group was trying to decide which of these issues we should focus on, because we only got $25,000 as a pilot to be able to do this work, as much as we would want to address all of them, we can't, but we wanted to develop a process where we can prioritize them, and the rest of the concerns we can be able to apply for further funding so we can start thinking about monitoring and addressing some of these other concerns. And so what we ended up doing is started by having the community leaders list all the concerns that were associated with the waste facility. Again, here you can see in the spectrogram all the different list of concerns that again, we weren't able to address all of them within that $25,000 budget. So we wanted to again prioritize these community concerns. And so the environmental concerns were ranked using criteria that was identified by the community members. And then the community members and the academic partners both rank these different community concerns differently. So we had a ranking system for community leaders and then another one for academic partners. The academic partner scores were only consulted when community partners were undecided on where they should place some of these concerns in the spectrogram. So for example, there was a chance for the community partners to start thinking about which are going to be the top 4 concerns that they're going to prioritize. They were undecided about a couple of them. They referred to them the academic scores to see like, what do the academic people say we should prioritize? And then they decided whether they were going to take our advice or not. But most of the time they were like, actually, we're not going to take your advice. We're going to go based on what we feel as though is what needs to be prioritized. And that is how this process and this type of tool helps us to make sure that our research process is not informed by what I think should be researched, but rather by what community members are directly seeing in their own community. And so here in this slide at the bottom, again, you should be able to scan the QR code and it should be able to give you access to how to be able to utilize this tool. This is just one of the ways that we utilize the spectrogram, but there's so many other ways that you can utilize this tool. And Training for Change has free training programs where you can be able to learn again how to be able to implement some of these tools in your work. And so working with Southeast Queens residents from Jamaica, Queens, as I've mentioned, they've actually recently formed an actual CBO. So Andrea Scarborough, William Scarborough, Renee Hill, Walter Dogan, Oscar Bryan are all part of Southeast Queens Residents Environmental Justice Coalition. It used to be all of them civic leaders organizing within their own neighborhoods, and now they have it officially a CBO. So we're really excited that they've been able to form that CBO and make us competitive for other type of funding as well. So when we started the partnership with them, we wanted to make sure from the beginning that we rooted our partnership again in anti-racism and empowerment. So we as researchers, so all the academic partners that I had mentioned were from CUNY, Mount Sinai, Rutgers, Medgar Evers College, York College. We made sure that the researchers understood their role in the partnership. And again, our role was not to save residents, but rather work in solidarity to amplify the power that they already have. And so this essay was part of a University of Michigan environmental racism series, highlighting the ongoing partnerships across the country that are organizing environmental justice action. So our essay was one of the 8 other essays that was selected to be featured on this special issue. So if you're interested in reading our essay that talks a little bit more about how we implemented some of these tools into our partnership, you can scan the QR code on the bottom right, and it should take you directly to the University of Michigan site where you can read the essay, and also you should be able to access the rest of the essays from other communities across the United States that are also organizing for environmental justice.
So it's important for us to challenge hierarchies in science. Who exactly gets to be a scientist? In our community science trainings, we do this activity where folks talk about ancestral traditions of science that their family passed down. This activity helps us highlight the fact that we can all be scientists and that academic degrees are not necessary to be.
So throughout the CVPR partnership, our group has participated in various data collection methods. And so for our particular CVPR partnership, we focused on, again, the particulate matter, odor and dust, and truck traffic. And so a lot of the particulate matter is coming from the truck traffic. So that is one of the reasons why we focus on specifically particulate matter, odor, and dust. And so for our data collection plan for particulate matter, we're using a device called a MiniVol, which is a filter-based air quality sensor that captures PM 2.5 over 24-hour periods. And then for our data collection plan for odor and dust, we launched in New York City 311 campaign to be able to encourage residents to report odors and dust concerns associated with the waste facilities. So we developed this banner, as you can see here in this picture, with youth leaders from Jamaica, Queens to be able to encourage residents to file 311 complaints. We've also been able to develop a community survey that captures the frequency and the severity that these odor and dust concerns are happening across the community, and to start thinking about when are they happening more frequently. And one of the things that the survey has revealed is that it's usually the summertime. So summertime is also the time that most people end up trying to spend time in their own yard, in the actual park. So we don't want these type of odors to be able to prohibit people from actually spending time with their family and spending time with their community in these green spaces. So those are the data collection plan methods that we ended up co-developing with the community leaders.
And this brings us to the current study. We were awarded an EPA grant to conduct an air quality, health equity, and climate change CVPR study to demonstrate the impact of emissions from waste facilities and other adjacent polluting sites on air quality in Southeast Queens. Through research field measurement of NO2, O3, SO2, PM 2.5, toxic metals, VOCs, and PFAS.
So yeah, we're very excited that this like $25,000 grant has turned into this $1 million grant. And now we're applying to this other larger grant through the EPA called the Community Change Programs Grant, where we're trying to actually build green infrastructure in Jamaica, Queens to directly be able to address these concerns here and now, rather than doing research and then implementing these solutions. So we're very excited that this partnership started with very little funding and now has led us to new partnerships with people that are so grateful to be part of our group. So a big shout out to Riana, who has been part of this process from the beginning, and for being able to see this partnership evolve to where it is now. And lastly, we wanted to end with what Rhonda had started with, is like, how does this all inform policy? And so for us, as we were doing all this research, we were also simultaneously thinking about how can we ensure that policies are being informed by the way that we work? And so that means anti-racism, empowerment, and environmental justice. So we ended up providing testimony for the Waste Equity Bill amendment that was going to expand waste coming back into Jamaica, Queens, when community residents already had done so much work to make that stop. So we were able to organize with the community leaders, and we also got the youth leaders to testify, to be able to talk about the importance of not allowing more waste to come into Jamaica, Queens. We also were able to provide testimony on the Zero Waste Bill to center EJ communities like Jamaica, Queens. So we wanted to make sure that those strategies are going to be led by Jamaica, Queens residents. And then lastly, one of the accomplishments from the Southeast Queens residents has been that they filed a lawsuit against the waste facilities in violation of the Clean Water Act, and they actually were able to settle this past year. And now they're having more regular visits between the waste facilities and the community members. And so our goal is to be able to use this type of research partnership to be able to take some of the results that we get from that pilot project and EPA grant, and then they can take it directly to those meetings with the waste facilities and be like, this is the state of our air quality right now. What are you going to do during the summertime now that the temperatures are going to be higher and the air quality is going to be poor? So it gives us an opportunity to create tangible changes and use the research that we develop to actually create change in the policy sense. So all of this, again, has really transform the way that we do work, not only in the way that we organize our meetings, but all the way to the advocacy work that we do. And so this work really would not be possible if it wasn't for all the people that are listed in this current list, without their mentorship, without their support and solidarity. Many of them are from Mount Sinai. So Maida Galvez, Sarah Evans, Sophia Kudumi Penley are all from Mount Sinai. Riana, who is one of the Southeast Queens residents and has been organizing with me for the past 4 years. Dr. Dawn Roberts Semple, who is the York College professor. She also was she was also with us from the beginning in that pilot project and was a leader in applying for that EPA grant. So a big shout out to her. She also just got tenure. So for her, it's a really, really big deal to be able to get tenure and be set in her position. Also Andrea Scarborough, who is the main resident that was able to organize all of this and be able to put together all these different partners from not only the health side, but also the air quality side and the advocacy side and the lawyers. A big shout out to the Scarboroughs, because if it wasn't for them, we all would not be here today. So I wanted to end with all those thank yous, because this work would not be possible if it wasn't for the partnerships that we're a part of. So, and with that, thank you all so much for having us and giving us the opportunity to share our work. And we're happy to answer any questions.
And I just want to thank Luz for their amazing leadership, and this wouldn't have been possible without them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is fantastic and amazing, and I feel like we almost need you guys to be speakers for a year every month so that we can really put this into practice. Do we want to start? Are there any questions in the chat, or are there any questions here that we want to start with in the room?
I'll just
I
ask
have
a question. Oh, go ahead. I'll just ask a quick question. Can you tell us again what CBPR stands for?
Yeah, it is community-based participatory research.
Awesome.
Also, it's also known as participatory action research, as PAR. So there's always a combination of how it's referred to.
Okay, Rona, were you going to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. My question, or I guess it's maybe an observation, is it seems like the researchers themselves did some pre-work, like just in terms of their own internal work around creating an enabling environment where they were kind of reducing the amount of harm that they were causing to community members by like checking their own privilege, biases, et cetera, all of that. But also it seemed like there was not a preconceived idea for the project, that that you came together and it really was a co-creation between community members and researchers about what you would actually research. So you weren't like, oh, we have this idea and what do you guys think about it? It was like, what's important to you all, what's meaningful to you all, and let's figure out a way to structure this research so that it's meeting your need.
Yeah, and thank you for making that observation, because I think sometimes we as also researchers discount the work that we have done. And to also just to clarify, within our group, all of us are BIPOC folks. Like, we don't have any white researchers in our space. So some of that personal work that we have done has been not only for our own safety and for our own communities, but also the understanding that liberation means that we need to understand how all of us are oppressed by these systems of oppression, and making sure that we're being in solidarity, we're organizing in solidarity with Black, Indigenous communities, most specifically than other groups. So thank you for making that observation, because it requires Riana and I to have so many discussions prior to even just forming an actual meeting. It's like we have a lot of these authentic conversations. And like, for example, one of those authentic conversations and privileges that we have is that both Riana and I are non-Black researchers going into a predominantly Black neighborhood doing this type of work. And that's something since the beginning we were aware of. So we had to make sure that we were checking our own ways that anti-Blackness shows up in research and also in our practices in our everyday lives. But that's not necessarily the work that we're trying to do alongside the community members. They don't need to educate us on that. That's something that we need to do for ourselves and not rely on them for that type of information. But how do you build that into your work meetings so you have those conversations? And oftentimes their conversations end up being like 2 to 3 hours because of how dense and how nuanced a lot of these conversations are. So Rona, thank you so much for making that observation, because I always forget to talk about and acknowledge all the work that we've done prior to as well.
I have a question if nobody else does.
Hands.
Oh, okay. I just want to make 2 quick comments. I have a million questions, but I want to make 2 quick comments. One is, I think it's so interesting how much checking ourselves that your work entails, but how much joy that you present it with. And so that checking yourself, we think of that as a fear-based activity. And I think I have to always encourage myself to remind myself that it is a joy-based, open-hearted thing to do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Rhonda. And I'm like, I would want to approach this with joy, because I want to show up better for the communities I love and serve. I'm like, that should bring me joy. And it should make sure that like it shows just how much, again, this work is rooted in love and community. And so if I just use this as a way to just like check a mark and be like, no, I read this book, now I'm informed. I'm like, no, I really wanted to feel like it's joyous for me to love my community and love to learn about my community that I'm a part of. So thank you, Rhonda, for sharing that.
It's beautiful. And the second thing I just wanted to say was that when you and I were talking about how this would go back in January, I remember one thing that you said that was very striking, which is that white supremacy culture hurts white people too. That it is not, that these are hurtful habits, practices, I don't know.
Yeah, like, and that perfect example goes back to individualism. I'm like, that's something that I still struggle to with this day. Like, there's many things I'm like, well, I can do it by myself. I'm independent. But I'm like, we've grown up culturally around community where we relied on our neighbors, our community, and our family. And so that idea that we have to do things by ourselves is only hurting us and disconnecting us from the people that we should be connected to. And when we are connected to community, that makes us stronger. So that's what white supremacy wants us to do, is to be by ourselves so that we don't connect with our surrounding communities and don't end up organizing to be able to deconstruct it. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Okay, yeah, please. Oh, yeah, you, Debbie, I guess, her Dan, would you like to?
Hi, thank you so much for your work. I actually met Sarah at a conference last year up at Columbia, which was actually their first conference on environmental health ever, and it was so exciting. And I'm a nurse, so like I just love what you're doing. And I'm wondering if you're planning to replicate it in other neighborhoods, because we have so many neighborhoods all across New York City that have these terrible situations because of waste of all kinds. And I love that you hit on the truck traffic waste because that is huge. That is huge all over, and especially like over by the BQE. We have in Sunset Park like a huge problem with environmental justice community there, and all the pollution and all the asthma and all the lung disease. And also like something that I've noticed, which is like a real pet peeve. I don't know if you guys are ever thinking of different ideas, but around our schools, around our public and private schools, we have the Mr. Softy. What can we call that? They get a free pass to
Yeah,
pollute,
for idling, yeah.
to idle their engines and sell the children, really bad stuff. So that's another environmental justice issue. And I know Senator Mehreen, like we have some really good state senators and assembly people who are like, like onto this. And I feel like, do you guys ever partner with them as well?
Yeah, so want to start with your question with like, can we replicate this? I'm like, we would love to for there to be so many of these partnerships. And of course, they're not going to all look the same as Southeast Queens. Every community is different. And so that's where our center can come in and support. So similar to how you met Sarah Evans, we have other researchers as well that are working closely with me and are also thinking through how do we incorporate anti-racism strategies into the research that we're doing. So some of the folks that are listed in that list, especially Mayra Galvez, Sarah Evans, Sophia Cordumi-Penley, those would be the type of researchers that we could potentially connect community groups to, so we can apply for pilot project funding, which is how we got that funding for our project to get started. And those grants go for $25,000 up to $70K. And so Sophia Cordumi-Penley, who is an assistant professor, she just received a CBPR, the Community-Based Participatory Research pilot project for $70,000. So that's the largest funding that our center has ever done for a CBPR project. So we're very excited that we've been competitive enough to actually get a $70,000 grant. So if there's a particular community concern, I can't say that I will particularly be available to be able to do all this work. It already takes so much work to be able to organize in Jamaica, Queens. But what I can do is be able to share with you all the different tools that we end up using to be able to organize our partnerships. So that is what we've been doing, is talking to other researchers, like, have you learned about this? Have you learned about that? Have you thought about incorporating this into your meetings? So that is more the type of assistance that like I and Riana and myself can provide. But if you're thinking through of an actual research project, or there's a community concern that you want to more formally organize with healthcare providers, let us know. And we're more than like happy to set up a time to discuss what that looks like, similar to what we did in Jamaica, Queens.
I wish I had that. Yeah, I wish I could just take all your tools and do it myself, but yeah, it would take a team of medical and social work and all kinds of different professionals and community members. And I see what you're saying, like it really takes a huge team.
Yeah, it takes so much work, and it really would not be possible if it wasn't for all the partners that we have. I wish that they all could be here today to co-present with us, but if not, this would be like a whole workshop, honestly, if all of them were here today. Yeah, I would really think through, are there partners that you can start bringing into the table so that this work can be more distributed equitably, and it doesn't feel like all the onus is on the community? Because that's the thing, is that sometimes community members don't want to participate in some of these projects because they're like, I'm already affected by all these injustices, and now you're asking me to actually do the research, like, of the things that are impacting me. So it is a burden to also have to document the own injustices that are happening in your own community. Like, that is something that Riana and I talk about all the time, is that we acknowledge that that's also really heavy emotionally to be able to do. So again, thinking through how can you apply some of these different frameworks and strategies into the work that you do. We hope that this presentation is the beginning of what that looks like. But if you want to follow up with us, I'm more than happy to discuss like what can we do to be able to think through a partnership or connecting you to folks who can help out with certain projects or certain issues.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you so much. Let's move to Dylan.
Oh, hey,
Thank you.
Luce and Rihanna, that was wonderful. Thank you. From my perspective, it was very welcome. So I guess in full disclosure, my wife is a longtime DEI professional, so we have a lot of these conversations in my house. But I'm sort of curious. I mean, a lot of people here don't have their cameras on, but if they did, you would probably notice that this group is very white compared to the overall mix of the borough of Brooklyn. And we, you know, like a lot of groups, a lot of organizations and companies after George Floyd, et cetera, I think made some efforts to try to figure out why that was, and to strategize a bit about outreach and how we could diversify our group. And I would say thus far it hasn't yielded the results that a lot of us would have hoped. And you know, I've been a part of this board for a long time, and I think we do really good work. I think we do really important work. I think we occupy a really important space. And I also think that a group that is 80 to 90% white doesn't adequately or responsibly represent a place as diverse as Brooklyn. So it's been sort of a festering frustration of mine, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in this. So sorry, that's a really long preamble, but to boil this down to, it's a little absurd to ask a question about what can we do about this, for a topic that's, as complex and far reaching as this. But I guess I'm curious, without any more context than that, if you've had other groups ask you questions like this, if you what would you start with? What are some strategies or ideas that you would begin with?
Thank you, Dylan, first of all, for giving the backstory of acknowledging where you're all at. And that is really important for your organization and for all of you to think about. I'm like, if that's where you all are at, then how to, again, you start strategizing how to make this be more equitable and actually more representative of Brooklyn. And so I have organized a lot of these type of presentations for researchers. And as you can imagine, a lot of academic spaces are very white as well. So whenever I do these type of presentations, the number one question, as you had alluded to, is like, how do I do this work? It's always the question, like, how do I do this work? How do I implement it? And again, it's because the reason why I always tell people the first thing to do is listen, is because a lot of folks really, again, always come in with an agenda. Like, even as we are thinking about recruitment for your organization, there's already an agenda in place. So can there be measures in place where you are going out to community and listening for the sake of listening without actually quantifying that it's going to lead to another member coming into Brooklyn SWAB? You're making that connection at a genuine connection, not because you have that agenda. If you happen to get that contact info of that person that you're connecting with, now they can be part of that group. That takes trust and that takes time. And so a lot of the work that we have done with community leaders and why our groups are very diverse is because the leadership that we have in our group is representative of the community. And so if I was to lead this partnership by myself in Jamaica, Queens, it would not go the way that it has gone, because Andrea Scarborough, who again has been a longtime resident, she already knows how the community works, how they make decisions, how to be able to share information. So she is a trusted person within a community to be able to share this information and invite more people in. And so that's the way that we were able to bring in all these community residents to participate in our research partnership, was because they also trusted Andrea, and Andrea also developed that trust with us. And so we had to have honest and difficult conversations on what that looked like. So I think for all of you, as you start thinking about, again, diversifying, what does it mean to diversify your space? Think about more about listening and building authentic relationships that later could lead to an actual more diverse space. And also too, if it is not a diverse space right now, why is it that it's not a diverse space? What barriers are there in place that is not making it so welcoming for people of color to be part of this space? Is it because that they see the majority of white people here? There needs to be more people of color in leadership positions. And again, I think that's one of the reasons why our partnership is so unique, is because all of us are BIPOC. And most of the time when we're in academic spaces, that's not the case. It's mostly white researchers talking down to us. So again, I just encourage you all to start thinking about building those authentic relationships without an agenda. Well, later in the long term, it could lead to trust and bringing in more folks into these spaces, and then asking them, what is the best way that we can engage with you? Is it meeting directly with you in your home? Do we need to help you set up Zoom? Like, all those different questions are going to come up once you ask people, like, how can we show up for you? And so, but that again takes trust. And not everybody's going to immediately open up about how they want to show up to spaces, especially when they see the majority of people being white. So again, that's something for all you to think about. Think about the barriers, think about building authentic relationships, and to really listen to what is happening around you without an agenda. I really encourage you all to just think about that. So Dylan, I hope that that helps with like reflecting about how to make some of these changes.
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you so much for that. Audrey, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, yeah, thank you so much. It's good to see you all, and Luz and Rihanna. It was a really great presentation. I'm hoping it's available because I would love to share it with some folks I've been working with. So I don't know if that's the case, but my question was about financing. So you got the 25,000 and then you got a second grant, which is so exciting. And I'm working on kind of a similar kind of like community driven project around biocultural specimens like up at the botanical garden. So this is like a brand new little like renegade project. We're trying to like have a community driven process there and do some research. The question is how you handle the financing, and the fact that folks are doing work and they need to be funded really for the work they're doing, because the community, like one of the things about SWAB that I believe is that a lot of folks here are volunteering to show up. There's not funding, and so that is a barrier. So I'm just curious how you handled the grant and how you built in support in that grant, and then also where that grant was fiscally received. Was it at the university? Did it go through the CBO? Like, how are you organizing that kind of funding and having the trust around that funding?
Yeah, Audrey, thank you so much for asking that question, because finance is the #1 issue that we always encounter around community engagement, especially around timely compensation between academic institutions and community partners. That is not unique to Mount Sinai. This is literally every single academic institution that I know of is terrible with being able to compensate community leaders. They ask you to send a W-9 form, your social security, like so much information that a lot of people do not feel comfortable sharing online or via email. So it ends up hindering our process when it comes to compensating people in a timely manner. And so to be very honest, I think academic institutions are not fit to be able to host these type of grants. And I think it really should be going directly to CBOs and community groups. So for that pilot grant, it was specifically through Mount Sinai. And that was our lesson learned, is that we're so happy that the Southeast Queens residents formed the CBO, because now those funds would go directly to them and not to Mount Sinai. And something else that some of you might not know is that Mount Sinai does have overhead costs. So when this $1 million grant that the EPA we just got from, that $1 million grant we just got from the EPA, they're going to be taking a big chunk out of that. And so that like 25% of money that is taken away to be able to cover everything that goes out in the university to process this grant, now we can't have access to it. So that has been what the #1 barrier, to be honest, in doing this work in a way that feels timely and it feels equitable. So for us, as we're moving forward with that other EPA grant that we're applying for, again, now the community group has a CBO, so they're going to be the main, they're going to be the fiscal sponsor. So all the funds are going to come through them, and they're going to be the ones disseminating those funds. So we're very happy that that is formed, because now they don't have to rely on Mount Sinai or York College or Rutgers to be able to distribute those funds. And the CBO is not going to be asking everybody for their W-9, their social security, all these extra details that why should the university have access to that? Like I had the university ask me for W-9s for youth leaders that were helping us distribute the odor and dust survey. I'm like, how do you guys expect me to send a W-9 form to a youth, like a person who is under 18? Like, it's absurd. So we have to think of creative ways to be able to have loopholes. So a lot of times for us, having gift cards is one of the easier ways that we can be able to process payments faster, rather than going through like we're compensating somebody individually. But Audrey, thank you so much for answering that question. If you want to set up another time to talk about finance, please, let's do that, because it's an ongoing headache that we have with the work that we're doing. And we're also thinking through what does that look like between academic institutions and CBOs. So happy to also like strategize with you what that looks like.
This is amazing. I feel like I want to have a meeting with our executive board to figure out how to structure our Brooklyn SWAB meetings a little differently if we can. Incorporate some of this. If anybody has any ideas about how to do that based on what you've seen from what Luz and Riana presented, please, Dylan, if your wife has ideas, or you from your conversations, that would be great. Does anybody else have any questions, observations, comments? Oh, is it Keely? Kaylee?
Good evening, everyone.
Yes, hi. Are you muted again?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Keela. I'm from Community Board 5. I'm the co-chair of Parks, Sanitation, and Environment. The presentation was so great and informative. And my question is, when you have studies like this, how do you share with the community members so that they can sort of like see themselves in the research and then ask questions, because their community is impacted and nobody is communicating, nobody is addressing their concern related to big trucks in their small streets and the new garbage rules. People are not really clear and informed, because sometimes there's no enforcement, but then they'll get the tickets, homeowners. And so there's all these issues. And I'm just wondering, how do you visit other communities so that they can hear the research you have done, and then they can ask questions to figure out how they can help themselves, or your help for that matter? Because I mean, environmental justice, food justice, health equity, they're all related.
Yeah, and I'm very, very thankful that the people we organize with are very intentional in how we all organize and how we show up to the spaces. And the community group that we've been organizing with, again, is Southeast Queens Residents for Environmental Justice Coalition. And where we're currently at with the pilot grant is thinking through how are we going to share the research results that we collected from that pilot and share it out with the community. And so one of the things we weren't able to do as part of this presentation, but we're planning on doing with community leaders is, what does air quality measurements mean in terms of different seasons, in terms of temperatures, in terms of the urban heat island effect? So we're thinking through on how to share those air quality measurements by organizing with the residents, and then thinking through, do we want to develop a website? Do we want to have a town hall where we end up talking about all these different air quality results, which, side note, most likely we're going to do a town hall. But we're going to use some of these different strategies, but we really want it to be guided by their voice, like what works best for them. But we're currently right now thinking through what is the best way that we can share these results so that people can see that it really is summertime, that we're seeing these spikes in air quality go up because of these hotter temperatures, because of climate change. So for us, we're thinking through, how do we do that with community leaders? And to your other question, one of the other things that we're thinking about is, like, how do we share our work so that other communities can see also some of the work that we're doing? So that essay that we had mentioned is one of the ways that we were able to connect with other community groups across the United States that are also organizing academic research partnerships to be able to address environmental injustices. But we also end up connecting the community leaders to forums that we end up running as part of Mount Sinai that are focused on environmental justice. So 2 years ago, we ended up hosting a community forum that was focused on liberation science. Like, what does it really mean for us to be able to organize science in service of liberation? And we had Dr. Jacoby Wilson, who was the one who ended up coining empowerment. He was the main speaker for that community forum, and we invited the Southeast Queens residents to join the community forum and hear him speak and how he's been organizing in Maryland around environmental justice issues. And he brought also community members with him. So that was an opportunity for Andrea specifically to see another researcher interact with a community member and be like, that is what we want to do. And so that was really helpful for Andrea and the rest of our partnership, because hearing another researcher speak and have skill sets different from mine and be like, I want that skill set, or can we bring that person into our partnership? And that's exactly what happened. So Jacoby Wilson is actually going to be part of our EPA grant because Andrea was like, we want to work with him because he knows what he's doing around this work. And he has a framework around liberation that really resonates with the community leaders. So a role for Riana and I is to, like, identify those type of opportunities where we can bring in community leaders and they feel as though their lived experience is something they can share and also something that they can learn from. So that's just one example of one of the ways that we've invited community leaders to our spaces. But we have to be very intentional because, again, academic spaces are very white. So some of them I'm like, I would feel as though it would be a disservice to bring him into the space and be impacted by some of the problematic things that people might say in those spaces. So I'm very, very protective of the spaces that I invite them to. And if it's going to be an academic space, it has to be intentionally organized with community members' lived experience being centered as part of that agenda.
Thank you. So how do we invite you to CB5?
I don't know.
No,
How
I
do
mean,
you?
because there's all these environmental factors that, you know, people are concerned about, and I don't, when people ask in the meeting, I don't know who to contact.
So actually, thank you so much for bringing that up. So we have a pediatric environmental health specialty unit. So the EPA is broken up into very different regions. Region 2 is New York, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Dr. Mayra Guel, who is my main supervisor mentor, directs the Region 2 PACU. And you can call that hotline with any pediatric environmental concerns. So for example, if you happen to have a construction project happening next to your home and your child has asthma and you have questions of like, what should I do about mitigating those dusts coming into my home? There is a board of pediatricians, healthcare workers, social workers, myself included, community engagement people that all take that case and then provide you with recommendations on how to be able to improve that situation. We also can connect you to our environmental health clinic. So if there's testing that needs to be done, we have an environmental asthma clinic. And also we have connections with lawyers. So if you need any type of tenant assistance, let us know. And we also have connections to NOPI and many other lawyers that associations that can support you with some of that. But I'm gonna try to find the PACE2 hotline number and I'm gonna put it in the chat. So feel free to direct folks to that that direction, and we'll take all these different calls. So send as many people as you can. That is what our job is to make sure that we provide that information so that you don't have to be the one digging through the internet and being like, what's true, what isn't true, because it's a lot of time to dig through the internet and find that information. So let me find that number for you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Brooklyn SWAB, for this presentation.
Thank you. Please come back.
Yes, I plan to. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So there's a question in the chat. Kendall asks, can you describe the settlement terms? I'm guessing about the lawsuit. Does it involve remediation, compensation? Is it operationally? Do they make operational changes?
Yeah, I don't have all the specifics because Andrea and the rest of the leaders speak when they were reaching that settlement, they had to be as secretive as possible in terms of what they can and can't share. But from my understanding, in terms of the infrastructure, one of the main changes that they're going to do is fully enclose the facility. So currently the waste transfer station is open. So all those odor and dust are immediately felt by the community. So that would be one of the structural changes. Another structural change that they are talking about is that the road that is the one directly behind the waste facilities that the trucks have to come into is unpaved. So as these large trucks are coming in with waste, they're picking up again all that dust and creating issues in the community. So they want to pave that section of the street, but also making sure that it doesn't end up contributing to flooding, because we know that flooding is a big issue specifically in this community. And also they're mandated in terms of like other settlement agreements, they're mandated to have biannual American, because there's American and then there's also Regal. So there's two waste facilities and both of them are managed differently by two different entities. So the settlement between American and Regal looks differently. So one of them, they're mandated to have at least one per year visit. And the other one is, I think, twice per year or 3 times per year. I can't remember. But I think Andrea would be the one to be able to give you more of those like details of what exactly the settlement is. But those are the main ones that we've been able to share out with folks, because we're now thinking through how do we partner with DOT so we get that street paved so we can immediately start reducing some of these odor impacts? And how long would it take for the waste facility to fully enclose the facility? And what would that look like if we monitor air quality? So those are some of the settlement agreements between the waste facilities and the residents. But like I said, I'm more than happy to connect you with Andrea. She might know more of those finer details that I might not be aware of.
Yeah, and Andrea's a member of the Queen SWAB. She used to be
Yes.
vice chair. So she's amazing.
Fabulous.
Yeah, as you both are as well.
Not as fabulous as Andrea though. The Scarboroughs. The Scarboroughs are awesome.
They're a team, yeah, a great team. Thank you so much. We're way over time, but I feel like it was so important. Everything we were talking about, everybody was so engaged. We really could have you stay until 9:30 if you.
If we were allowed to be in Borough Hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's true. But thank you so much. You're welcome to stay if you want to, and you're also welcome to leave if you need to get on with your lives.
I'm ready for dinner, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I understand that.
I'm like, that's mostly what I've been waiting for. I'm like, after this, I'm gonna be eating good.
Well, thank you both so much for the work that you're doing and for just sharing it with us.
Yeah,
We hope to keep up with you
Mhm.
with more work that you're doing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. And Rhonda, I'll make sure to send over the PDF version of the slides, and feel free, like I said, to use any of the resources that you see here. That's one of the reasons we included them as part of the presentation, and it gives you at least a starting point to be able to incorporate some of these strategies into your work. So thank you all so much for having us, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
And thanks to everybody for your great questions too. Thank you. That was fantastic. Okay. All right. So I hate to move on to the boring reporting part of the meeting, which is what one of the rules not to try to do, but here we are. The executive committee we've already passed. Debbie, you'll be happy to know that we approved your minutes, wonderful minutes from March. So we don't have anything else to report. So, oh, yeah, sorry, oh my
It's
God.
okay, I
Lucy.
cannot go
No,
if we're
please
too far
go.
behind, I don't have a time.
No,
Okay.
please go, we almost catch up.
Hi, everybody. I'll be really quick. I think the only main like trash related thing that we have done at Borough Hall since our last meeting was that we provided testimony at a sanitation rules hearing on commercial waste zones. That was a couple weeks ago. It got a little bit of press. You might have seen there was a Gothamist article and something on Streets blog, which was very surprising because it was you don't often see press at an agency rulemaking. But there is some attention on the implementation of commercial waste zones, which is good. We want people to be paying attention. And I think the message, so the rule that we were commenting on was very simple. It was just the pilot district that they're intending to roll out in the fall, which is going to be in Queens. It's a very diverse district. It's like East Elmhurst, Corona, Jackson Heights. And all the rule said was basically this is the geography and these are the dates of the quote unquote pilot. And so what we asked for, it's a tough needle, right, to thread, because the BP really supports implementation of the program, actually wants to see it move more quickly. But it's sort of and it's not a no, it's more of a yes, and we would like to see, in addition to, you know, just the fact that this is happening, clear metrics on how they intend to evaluate it, because we never envisioned there was going to be a pilot. They're actually required to do the whole city by the law. So we want to know how they will, you know, what they're intending to monitor, how they're going to do that, and how they'll make decisions about what to change or not change as they roll out future districts. The other thing was outreach and education. As I mentioned, it's a very diverse neighborhoods. So, and we haven't really seen anything on their plans for outreach to the businesses about how to participate. So that really needs to be done in a robust way, multiple languages, all that good stuff. And then the third thing was just compliance with the law in terms of convening the safety task force. That's part of commercial waste zones. They actually were out of compliance with the law, having not convened it in the last couple of years. And it was reported in Gothamist that they are planning to schedule the next meeting. So I feel like we accomplished something by putting some attention on this, but we're going to continue to do that. And as Kendall mentioned in the chat, there's a bill that Councilmember Nurse has to create an advisory group that would go beyond just the safety task force and look at all other kinds of things in the program, which we're very supportive of, and also mention that. So that was the main thing. And then we have our eyes on two things coming up, which will be the executive budget hearing. There's actually another sanitation committee hearing coming up this month. It's about street cleanliness. If that is of interest to you, take a look at that. But we have our eyes mostly on the budget hearing in May, and then we have heard from Councilmember Bray that they intend to do an oversight hearing on commercial waste zones in June. So more to come on all of that.
Okay. See, we're so glad that you reported on this stuff. That was great. Okay. So should we talk about the coalition updates? Vondra, do you have a question about?
Yeah, I just wondered if Lacey knows from what the borough president is doing about the restoration of some of the cuts. I just heard tonight that somebody's going around and telling people that they have to give their priority to the top 3 items that they want restored. So I think that's going out to all of the council members, and I'm wondering if that is on Reynoso's desk as well.
Yeah, thank you, Vondra. We did provide testimony at the budget hearing in March. about that. I don't know if you all saw the council actually put out their budget response to the preliminary budget.
It's all great, but I think the pushback now is that they want all of us that were supporting this to actually name 3 of the most important things to restore. So they're not putting us all in a fight against each other.
Okay, so my family, I don't know exactly what's going on in the council right now, but there's a lot of that kind of stuff that happens in the process of like rank your top 3 for this thing and that thing and this other thing. And the Progressive Caucus does it and the BLAC does it and the borough delegations do it. There's a lot of rankings. So I wouldn't worry too much about that because actually I think that has to do more with the way that the council spends its discretionary dollars. And what I'm hoping will happen is that the advocacy has been so strong that the administration will just agree to restore the cuts on their own and council won't have to spend discretionary dollars on it. However, if they come back with the executive budget, it's not in there, I think they'll revisit that conversation. But the amount that's actually needed is so small in the scale of the large budget. I feel confident they'll figure it out one way or another. So I guess my answer is I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but I don't feel worried right now. You can hold me accountable later if I was wrong. And then to answer Kendall's question, yes, today there was a franchise and concession committee meeting. I'm not our office's rep to that. It is our general counsel. He attended. One of the things they were talking about was the city's contract with the company that is going to provide the bins for residential containerization for the 1 to 9 unit buildings, which is ultimately going to be required. I asked my colleague to ask about outreach and education. They basically said they're planning for that, but it hasn't started yet. I mean, so yeah, not a lot to report back, but you know, we took the opportunity to ask them about it on the record.
Thanks, Lacey. But the key thing I wanted to get your attention to is that the rule itself for requiring those containers has not been issued.
Right.
It won't be until July, according to my sources. So they're putting the sort of the cart ahead of the horse here and entering into a concession agreement to produce millions of containers that may be required to be purchased by city residents, but not having really adopted or explained the rule yet.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure what to say. I mean, I think, yes, that's true. And we will keep our eye on that rulemaking. And also I'm sure that's one that will get lots of attention. So it's just nice to know that these like kind of small things that happen in these processes, people are starting to see as opportunities to like really get their voices heard. So Deborah, do you have a question?
Yeah.
I don't want to take up too much more
I
time.
know.
Oh, you're muted.
On that note, I'm not familiar with all these different committee meetings, but can we weigh in? Because like, for example, is that going to go ahead with a new law in July that's going to mean millions of new virgin plastic trash receptacles? And is that what we're, doing without any thought to that?
Yeah, when the rulemaking happens, there will be a public hearing. So make sure to stay on top of that.
There's been a suggestion when we met with the commissioner to come up with a reuse plan for all of the bins that are gonna be not in use anymore. Yeah.
Right. I mean, my head is a little bit exploding about that, like that we're just gonna create millions more of virgin plastic trash. So.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know.
So like, could we as a SWAB weigh in on these things?
Sure, I think if there's a hearing, there's an opportunity for us to submit testimony, even.
Yeah, because I think that like really we've got to weigh in on that.
Yeah.
And what was
Yeah,
the
but
other?
Kendall's point is well taken that they didn't really do, as far as I know, there wasn't like a public way to comment on this particular contract.
Right,
Yeah, 'cause it's
which,
not in law, and the law is not going to pass until July.
yeah,
I guess I just don't understand these weeds of the city government enough to understand how could we impact that?
Well, I mean, this is a bit unusual because the city is not itself buying the containers. It's offering a concession agreement to a private vendor selected through a competitive process to literally have the right to sell to New York City residents the container that DSNY has specified with them. And at some point that will become a required purchase. And that bags will no longer be collected, and that non-city approved containers may not be collected either. But those are aspects of the rule itself or how it gets rolled out that have not had any sort of public attention. The commissioners sort of treated it as sort of a fait accompli that she's going to impose this requirement. But think about your particular neighborhoods, your residential blocks, whatever else of what it means for better, for worse, and they're going to have lots of opinions about it, shifting from sort of collection of bags to having rigid containers on your street on a 24/7 basis. So what that's going to look like, and again, it's been 50 years or more since the city moved away from rigid containers to plastic bag collection. So lots of issues to be considered and discussed, and DSNY doesn't do a great job of engaging in that kind of discussion before they move forward with these kinds of plans.
And does the law specify that you can't put plastic bags into the container?
No, I don't think so. So
So
the
how-
commissioner was asked the other day, the other commissioner was asked the other day about what happens if you can't get the container between two parked cars, and her answer was, well, the guys will pull the bags out of the container and toss them into the truck. The way they do now, essentially. So
Have brand new plastic containers with a lot of plastic bags in them. That's it.
yeah.
Okay, just wanted to check all that. I mean, and see like the DSNY is putting.
But again, no discussion of, changing in frequency of collection or what the right sizing of containers is, all sorts of, again, lots of operational and other issues embodied in that won't be discussed until they publish the rule that says, here's what the plan is.
It's a real missed opportunity to do save as you throw also. Like if everyone's gonna have to get new bins anyway. But.
right, because if they need more bins, then they'll have to buy more bins, and that is a kind of save as you throw. I mean, it's the opposite, right?
Yeah, I guess I just mean they could figure out a way to do sizing that would incentivize diversion.
Right,
Yeah,
but it's, I don't know, from
but I don't think
things I've
that's
seen,
on the table.
yeah.
I'm personally, professionally not a fan of save or pay as you throw in New York. I've heard hundreds of presentations about it, and all of them say, do not try this in dense urban areas.
So Uli asks if these will fit the new garbage truck style, or will a new bin? My guess is that that's what the plan is.
Yeah.
That these will be all able to be used.
Tipped.
Yeah,
The idea is that these will be tippable, but again, it's
Yeah.
going to be a question of, can you maneuver getting the container from the sidewalk to the back of the truck between tightly parked cars and whatever else. So
My understanding of the new trucks that they're going to retrofit is that I'm here in the corner.
Yeah.
It is that they will have the option to both be hooked onto containers, but also have like the back where they can still dump the bags, so that they can be flexible in either way. And that the lifting up of containers is more for larger containers that they're planning for
Like
larger
dumpsters.
buildings.
Right.
Yeah,
Like what they're piloting up in a raised.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. But anyway, we
Yeah.
should probably move
Yeah.
forward.
So, yeah, we may not get to everything, but,
We're gonna try.
let's start with the legislative committee
Wait,
update.
coalition.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm turning the page too fast. Yeah.
I can do a quick, save our compost. It's not really quick because there's
A million
many meetings every week and a lot of goings on, but, as Lacey mentioned, the budget response from the city council had, community composting back in it, but it is not finished, it's not done, so there's now what that is, and where that needs to be. Also, one point we did not really take a deep dive in is big reuse is, their salt lot is already closed for other reasons, not related to the parks issue with Queensbridge, so they only have baby Queensbridge right now. And, Parks has said they're not renewing their lease because they need that space not to build a new park. They need the space to park their vehicles on while they're constructing another park nearby. So the site would not turn into a park, the site would be used for a parking lot.
And they already have a parking lot.
And they have a parking lot, so there's a lot of advocacy to try to help that, there's, I don't. We could deep dive it, but we're already at time, so social media. Feel free to email the SWAB if you're not familiar with it and want more information, there's a lot of things we can share, there's a letter, there's.
There's a new petition also that I will send around.
Yeah.
To the big list. for the
Yeah. So that's going on. Let me see, oh, there's a press conference on the 19th for that, I don't know if that's on the agenda or not, but that's happening next Friday. There's. There was a few teach-ins that were like modified teach-ins that happened in March. We did, it's kind of an overlap with some outreach committee stuff, but we also did some community board presentations that were on behalf of the SWAB, but also part of Save Our Compost outreach. So that's also going on. So working on getting resolutions going, this Manhattan Community Board 1 and Queens Community Board 6 has already passed resolutions. So we presented at Brooklyn Community Boards 1 and 2 last week, so we're waiting. They were receptive, we'll see what comes out of that, so we're in touch with them.
I'm just gonna jump in on that and say
Yeah.
thank you to Mary Ellen for helping
Yes.
to arrange that, and also thank you to Lee for like helping to make our presentation look very nice.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of, it's not just a couple of us doing it, there's been a lot of work. And a lot of last minute, oh, can we do this, can we do this? And hopefully continue conversations with the community boards, because of it. I think I will leave it at that. To allow other folks, unless there's anything I'm missing, you guys, there's a Save Our Compost full meeting tomorrow, so we'll see where things are at. And share out if there's anything that needs to be shared.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, reusable NYC. Is over here, yay.
I wasn't able to attend, but Mary did, and she forwarded me the update from it. And it sounds like a big part of what they talked about was that new Pods Plastic bill, which is, I believe, Gennaro is the main sponsor of that, and that's trying to get the PVA out of laundry and dishwasher detergent, so banning that, which is great. And there's a sign-on to support the bill. I'm not sure if that's something that the SWABs can do, but maybe we can think about it. I'll pass it to you, Rhonda and Beth. And then just also something that they listed is that on Thursday there's a showing of the movie We're All Plastic People Now at the Greenpoint Library. And I think Oceana is hosting that, so I'll make sure to pass that information around for the minutes.
Okay.
And I'll put it in the chat.
Great. Would you like to stay on, Uli, to do the legislative committee outreach update?
Sure. Yeah, so last month we canceled because it was the same day as the sanitation hearing, and it was a really long day for a lot of you. So at the last minute, we just decided, you know what, let's not put you through that. But this month we'll talk about some of the new introductions that came through recently. They're mostly Sandy Nurse sponsored bills, but they're listed on the meeting minutes, and they span from like a local law to tests for microplastics in the drinking water, study of single-use plastics to look for where different initiatives for reducing plastics, getting organic waste composting facilities in each borough, doing the waste characterization study more frequently, and then clarifying the definition of organic waste drop sites as well. And the last one is to kind of promote or make sure that land that the city-owned land, I believe, is going to be made available for urban agriculture. All of those for unused unused industrial areas, which all of those sound like really great, and we hope to talk through them next legislative meeting, which is this Thursday. So come chat about it with us. Sorry, next Thursday. Nope, next Thursday, April 18th.
Uli, I just wanted to flag for you, I flagged this for Rhonda also, but another one is the Guel Brewer composting in parks bill. Which I see is not on this list, but
it's not. I'm gonna add it to the legislative tracker. I went through today and to see if there were any additional ones to add there. But yeah, that one's really cool and something I'm pretty interested in myself. But yeah, that's it. Hope to see you next Thursday.
Hey, thank you so much.
I have the Manhattan SWAB Legislative Committee next Thursday on my agenda. Is that correct? Or is it a joint meeting?
Hey, I'm not keeping track of the committee
It's
meetings
joint.
in Manhattan. Ours is joint with the Queen SWAB.
Never mind.
So
do they? Are they on the same day?
To maybe get all three swabs together.
I've always seen that. That
We've-
all those said
we've
every
always
legislative
wanted to.
committee that I've been to, so I thought it was Manhattan.
Yeah. So thank you for pointing that out, Kendall, because maybe we could reach out to them, see if Anna would be willing to join together. Okay. Thanks. So organic outreach.
So on the official part of the outreach, I just want to say tomorrow night, we're going to be meeting at 6:30 via Zoom. So if you're interested in joining, please let me know. I can make sure you have the info. Other than that, I was not actually at March's meeting. Mark led it, so I'm going to pass it to Mark to give the update this time. And thank you all, including Mark, especially for leading it.
Sure. Hey, everybody. The last meeting, we really were focused on what was going on with zero waste in schools. We had Danielle Foster Russell come in and speak, and she gave us a lot on the history of what that organization has been doing in schools in terms of fostering and understanding of recycling and zero waste issues for kids in public schools. And that was wonderful to hear. And it's tragic that this program is not going to be funded anymore. A big focus of our meeting was talking about ways to try to reinstate funding and getting behind testimony and letter writing. Danielle has been doing fantastic work for many years with the organization. So that was a real eye-opener for a lot of us on the great work that has been going on there for so long. And the outreach committee has been trying to figure out ways where we might be able to work with youth on recycling and composting advocacy, trying to spread the word on the value of these things in schools and just with young people in general. And we are looking at engaging with organizations that already exist to try to help them out, try to fill in the gap now that zero waste is not going to be happening so much in the schools after the 1st of June. And we're also thinking, we're also working on a resource for teachers who want to take their classes to field trips where they might learn about composting. So we've been putting together a list of garden sites in Brooklyn that have composting going on, where school teachers might be able to connect with the people at this garden and provide their students with some background on community composting. And if anybody's interested in helping with that list, give me a holler. We got about 20 or so gardens that do composting on the list, and we need more. And that's a work in progress. And like Sherry said, we're meeting tomorrow, and that's going to be on the agenda along with these other efforts to connect with young people. That's been our focus. So there you have it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. How about the Organics Industry Committee? Anybody report about it? Allison?
That's me. Yeah, we just had our meeting. And I wasn't on, I missed part of your meeting. Did you talk about the everything going on with the budget cuts and the outreach to council members that are still needed? I think Vondra mentioned earlier that, it was recommended that they restore it, but then now that all the council members have to pick their 3 top priorities. And we're trying to get outreach to all those council members, and especially targeting the budget negotiating committee. And there's a petition, there's a lot of stuff that you can sign on to as organizations. The SWABs could consider signing on to it. I can put the link to the chat if you haven't seen it. We can all sign their petitions. Also, the Queen SWAB did a resolution, and I wonder if all the SWABs might want to do a resolution in support of restoring the budget cuts. So I can put a link to that in the chat perhaps too. And I think the only other thing I wanted to mention was Link NYC, and I may be wrong, but Lacey, did you mention at a meeting last month maybe that you had a connection with Link NYC? Because they will run free ads, so if we came up with an ad in Brooklyn, the targeting Brooklyn specifically. I just didn't know if I had a note that someone had a connection, and if it's not you, that's fine, because we can reach out.
No, it was me, and then I asked, and I don't remember what. Come back to me on that.
And it's something I was going to discuss at the outreach committee tomorrow, anyway, so. I think that's about it. You guys mentioned the legislation. Uli mentioned some legislation regarding organics, so that's it.
Okay, thank you. That was a lot. Events committee? Liz, do you have a?
Yeah, I have an update, and Mary Ellen, please also jump in with what I may have missed. So we have a cleanup planned for May 4th. It's a Saturday of the Erie Basin Park, including Red Hook Farms. And this cleanup is being organized as part of Riverkeeper. Riverkeeper has an annual cleanup of the Hudson stretching from upstate to the city. So this is the Red Hook is the area that we identified for cleanup. And Mary Ellen has done the work to determine where the cleanup will be happening. And so there's Erie Basin Park, which is behind IKEA. And there's like a waterfront area with a pier stretching out into the water. So part of the cleanup will be at the Erie Basin Park and the pier. But also Mary Ellen has worked with Red Hook Farms and to coordinate that there will be a cleanup of the perimeter around Red Hook Farms. And this also coincides with an event taking place at Red Hook Farms that day, where they'll have like a plant giveaway. So this is in collaboration with them. And there's so Riverkeeper kind of provides the organizational tools. They've set up an Eventbrite page, and Mary Ellen has worked with IKEA. IKEA will actually take the trash that the SWAB collect. Yeah, so the next steps are to send out the Eventbrite. Well, first, I think executive committee will just need to run it by you, because it'd be great to share it with the larger list. It looks like we've already had some folks register that without the Eventbrite page being even publicized. So it will be, it's open to everybody, SWAB members, friends, family, guests on the email list, but also it's open to anybody who may come across it through Riverkeeper. So it'll be a mix of SWAB folks and SWAB associated folks, but then just the general public as well.
Great. Thank you so much for connecting on that and offering that opportunity. Again, we can try to everybody do that. Who can want to participate? Should we go to the night shift? Susan, do you have an update from the?
Oh, can I say one more thing,
Okay.
Rhonda?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So there's going to be an events meeting next week, probably on Wednesday, the 17th. And there's a couple of opportunities to get involved in planning this event. We'll be soliciting some donations for gloves and trash pickers in the next couple of weeks. So I'll send out an email about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, Susan, now. Sorry.
Oh, there are a couple of environmental and gardening events at NYCHA campuses. And just with respect to the presentation that we had earlier, so Manhattan NYCHA is, they are doing some concrete outreach there. So they're going to be tabling at the Johnson Houses Community Center on April 13th. There's an event called Seasons of Growth, which is for gardeners and farmers, I think, people who are interested in that and who live in NYCHA houses. And on April 27th, in partnership with it's the Inner City Green Team is doing a Green Spring Fling. So they're also going to be tabling at that. So that's my update. I won't go into other discussions.
Thank you so much. I
You're
want to be respectful of the people at Brooklyn Borough Hall who are waiting for us to be finished. So thank you for waiting, and thank you everybody for such a great conversation that made us go this long. Take a look at the community announcements. There are quite a few litter cleanups and Earth Day events. Thank you to Keela for contributing the Earth Day. East New York Garden Advocates, and we'll send out, maybe Beth and I can put our heads together and send out like a list of all the different cleanups or something and make it in one place for everybody.
I was planning to do that.
Oh,
Rhonda.
good. Okay,
Thanks, Debbie.
Okay, Debbie, it's all yours.
Yeah, so if anybody has knowledge about any events, especially going on for Earth Day or Earth Week, it's the Earth versus Plastic this year. That's the theme.
Yep.
So there's a lot of good stuff going on. I know of 2 events personally, and they were not on this list yet. So if anybody else knows about events, please send them. You can email me. I'll put my email here.
Yeah, and we'll just consolidate them all. Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate it.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
Michael, we.
Thank you all.
Bye,
Good
thank
night.
you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.